And welcome back from the weekend as we get ready for another week of the offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers. But while Derek is not here, we had to decide what do we do with that third chair in the studio. Kyle Neubeck, Devon Gibbons, Brianna with us as always, you in the chat, and a special visit by our buddy from the PHLY Eagles podcast.
That's right, RKF, Zach.
Already getting it in, Zach Berman joining us with some thoughts on the basketball side of things. And folks, don't be surprised because he has plenty of thoughts all season long. We now bring it to the camera. Zach, welcome.
This is awesome to be here. I'm here so you guys can feel tall because Derek's usually sitting in the seat. There's a little bit of a difference, but this is an absolute treat for me because, like I was saying before, Brian Dawkins used to say he does Monday to Saturday for that he gets paid Monday to Saturday.
Yeah.
He does Sunday for free, right? Like this is a passion for me coming on this show, talking Sixers, being with you guys. And it's the cool part about PHLY is that we have every team covered.
And that's why we deemed it the crossover here, the episode.
Yeah, I'm crossing over. I got my Cancun shirt on. I was hanging out with Jamal Murray.
We'll get to that later, folks.
Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I'm about to get on a plane after the show, go to the Serbian horse farm, riding him around with Nikola Jokic.
He was ready. He was ready.
Listen, we'll get there.
Nikola Jokic was ready. We'll get to that. But look, we got a lot to get into with this one. Of course, some things changed. The conference finals are now set. Both East and Western Conference Finals is set. Indiana will take on the Boston Celtics. And as Kyle just mentioned, the Minnesota Timberwolves will begin to host the Dallas Mavericks. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, Kyle, how was your weekend, man? And enjoying the games and just settling down a little bit and kind of getting ready for this. Was this the third week of the offseason for us? Third week?
I don't even. Days don't really. I guess I shouldn't say that
terrible.
now because we are a Monday to Friday 2:30 show.
It's the start of the third week.
It's no more. But time has no meaning. It's the weekend was good. I did not enjoy the Saturday filled with rain. It kind of ruined a lot of plans many of us had. I did quite enjoy the basketball we got this weekend.
Sure.
We're probably not going to talk about them much today, but the Thunder Mavericks Game 6 in Dallas that came down to a challenge in the final 4 seconds of the game.
I thought he had all ball.
The only game that didn't feel like a Game 7 was the Knicks Pacers game, right? Yeah. And that's because Indiana had the greatest shooting performance in the history of the playoffs.
70%.
The rest of the weekend of basketball was just like rock fight, defense, guys just slugging it out. Fans just falling onto the floor. I can't say John Starks. John Starks pretending he's still playing for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson, before he got hurt, paying tribute to him with a terrible game in a Game 7. This weekend just had everything, fellas. So I'm happy to be here to talk about it. I'm happy to pick Zach's brain a little bit. We're talking before the show about Zach's devotion to League Pass and how much he cares about the ins and outs of the NBA and how it contrasts with the NFL. So I don't know if I want to give Zach just like a soapbox to talk about his philosophy on the NBA. But
absolutely.
But I think that's where I want to start. It's like, so I guess what do you make of the Sixers right now, Zach, as it relates to the rest of the league?
Well, I think that you start off with the fact that they have one of the ex-players who you think you can win a title with, right? And I know Embiid hasn't gotten past the second round, but it's almost like when you talk about the NFL, you say, all right, which quarterbacks can you win a Super Bowl with realistically?
Yeah. And
in the NBA, it's which stars can win a title. Now, it takes more than one. We know that, but it's outside of those Pistons teams from 2 decades ago, unless you have one of the 10 best players in the league, you don't have a shot of winning. And just like in the NFL, if you don't have one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league, you don't have a shot of winning. So I start off with that premise that the Sixers have Joel Embiid. And when you have Joel Embiid, you can try to figure the rest out. It's easier said than done, but it's the foundation that everything hinges on.
And staying there, the conversation oftentimes is, since they haven't won, we are now playoff visit number 8 for Joel Embiid. Sure. No second round, nothing past the second round. And then it goes right into, well, you can't win with the big man, or you can't win with Joel Embiid in particular. It's time to move on from him. We know we have a lot of spirited conversations around here. not just with Vince, but others, and then certainly in the chat and outside of Philadelphia area, even the fans here in general, moving Joel Embiid. So playing off of that, when you do have that ex-player, and Joel Embiid is that ex-player, do you still, even the way it ended, feel like they still have that window that's still open because you have him?
I do, and I view it similarly to. I'll keep bringing up the Eagles because obviously that's what I do on a daily basis. When there was discussion about trading AJ Brown, and my response was, you moved mountains to get a player like this, right? This is the kind of guy who you spent those draft picks and the draft capital and then the contract, and it's different NFL to NBA. But when I see what's the alternative to a guy like Embiid, you know, I've talked to people who say, why don't you trade for those Thunder picks? You trade for those Thunder picks to get a guy like Embiid, right? So that's the whole premise of it, is to get a player. Now, what do you do once you have him? And that's the question, and that's when you can start to get into what happened with Ben Simmons, what happened with Markelle Fultz, the missed opportunities in the postseason. But I don't think they haven't moved on because of Embiid. I think they haven't moved on because of all the other circumstances around
Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had something stuck in my throat.
Yeah, and like that was the way they pushed their chips into the table rather for Tobias, and then some of those other moves when you trade for the number one pick and it's Fultz. When you have the number one pick, you give a max contract to Simmons, and you got to turn around and trade him. So I understand that it can come off like I'm making excuses for Embiid, but I see it like I keep going back. There's X amount of players you can win a title with, and from where I sit here, Embiid's one of those guys.
So I have a question for you, Zach, because we were talking about team building mechanics before the show. Do you think it's generally easier for NFL teams to get themselves out of a corner they've painted themselves into, or do you think I had that impression because Howie Roseman and the Eagles do a good job of, especially on like the contract side, and leaving themselves draft capital as a backstop, so to speak, that they've just done a better job relative to the rest of the league, where when they do push some chips in and say, all right, we're going for it this year, and I'd say generally the Eagles are always going for it. It's like not Super Bowl or bust is that a fair way to characterize them as an organization?
Well, yeah, I would say be competitive or bust, not being in the middle. Yeah.
So have the Sixers, or is it more difficult, broadly speaking, at the NBA level to get out of these jams, or do we think that the Eagles are just good at avoiding them in the first place?
No, I think it's much more difficult in the NBA. I think being an NBA GM is, well, it's harder and easier. It's easier in the sense that like once you have one of those guys, you're at such an advantage. Mm-hmm. I suppose you can compare it to having a quarterback in the NFL, but it's so from where I sit, you can turn around an NFL franchise. There's more options to turn around an NFL franchise than there is an NBA franchise. First off, the volume of players you're talking about. You have 53 players on your team, right? You have 22 players on the field. 11 on defense, yep, and 11 on offense. There's more flexibility with the cap. There's more flexibility in terms of the draft, right? I'm an NBA draft nerd too, but outside of the top 6 to 8 players on a given year, unless you strike gold on Tyrese Halliburton or you go on down the list, Jaden McDaniels at pick 28. Mm-hmm. Naz Reid was undrafted, but typically to get these guys we're talking
Nikola
about.
Jokic famously was drafted during a Taco Bell commercial during the NBA draft, which is one of the. Yeah. I don't remember if it was a chalupa or a cheesy gordita crunch they were showing, and then it was just like Nikola Jokic, Denver Nuggets, and that's which is part of the lure, right? Like they made this. It's so out of left field that they were advertising Taco Bell rather than focusing on who they were drafting. Where in the NFL, it's like every guy, it's like scouting report, film. There's just so much out there.
Also, you can get difference makers on day 2 of the draft. You're getting contributors to your team late in the draft. Like I'm looking forward to watching your guys' draft content this year, and I know it's spread out over 2 days for the first time. But the reality is, the players who we talk about as being the true difference makers are going to be gone within the first 15 minutes of the draft. And frankly, this year's draft,
yep,
you might not even have a guy like that, right? And so that's a way of saying you can turn around an NFL team with a volume of picks with scouting much more effectively than you can in the NBA, and then contracts in the NBA that the day a guy signs a max deal or you have that deal, and then you're only trading his contract for a contract. In the NFL, free agency, you hear what the contract is, and then 3 days later you see the contract and you say, all right, well, the contract's not actually that, and you can get out of it. And even then, deals aren't as burdensome, right? So I think you can be more creative in the NFL in how you put your roster together, in how you structure contracts. And the reality is you can have different team building strategies in the NFL, but really I think there's only one team building strategy in the NBA that kind of trumps everything else, and that's get the best player.
So they got the best player in terms of Embiid, MVP candidate this year before he went down with the injury, and a finalist the year before he even won it. But so when you look at it and being around the Eagles, having won it, the success that Howie Roseman has had in the draft, the ownership, being the part, the one thing that we both know with both sides, Sixers and Eagles, is they will spend money, both sides.
Absolutely.
The difference is the Eagles have won. What have you seen in terms of the building that goes on as to why, as a Sixer fan and watching it intently as you do, as to why they have not won? You mentioned Fultz, you mentioned Simmons, but along the way with Embiid, why haven't they won?
It's a good question, and I can kind of go year by year. The only year to me,
we've got time.
The only year to me that I look at as inexcusable was the Atlanta year, where they were clearly better than the team they faced. They should have made a run. Yeah, I think the Toronto team, and we were talking about this before, the team that lost to Toronto 19 and last year's team were in positions where they could have won. And then this year, I think they should have beaten the Knicks. I'll say that. And the deck was stacked for them to make a run. We talked about the results this past weekend. None of these teams left outside of Boston, I think, are so burdensome that I would say like the Sixers can't get past them. And then with Porzingis hurt, it changes Boston. But to kind of give the succinct answer to your question, they've had some unlucky bounces, right? I'm literally against Toronto 3 or 4 bounces, right? But
trigger warning. Sorry, everybody. And
I suppose this goes back to Embiid. You never see them fully healthy at the right time, right? And that could be on Embiid. I'll defer to you guys for why every single April and May and June, not really June, but typically April and May. This comes up. Actually, I think there was one year it was June. That was the lockout year, right? Yeah.
Was that August?
That was
July.
August.
July.
It was the one impacted by. It was coming off of the COVID Disney World, whatever bubble season. Yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah. So I look at that, but that stands out to me. And then in the NFL, I think you're able to withstand injuries more because of depth. Number one, but also. When you look at team building philosophies, there's like what the line of scrimmage can do for you in the NFL. There's nothing comparable to that in the NBA. You can say build a good defensive team, but the reality is you can dictate your matchups in the NBA. You can't do that as much in the NFL. Yeah,
and when you talk about lucky bounces, I mean we harp so much on that Knicks game. What was that, game 1 or game 2, where the bounce that Jalen Brunson got on that 3-pointer? That bounced and went in, and then everything else just kind of
the other side of it too.
Off of that, right? With those bounces.
I've had arguments with our coworker Vince for the last week or so about Josh Hart, and Josh Hart in round 2. Now, set aside the end of the series where he's hurt. Like I'm certainly not going to be like, oh, he shot 0 for 4 while he's got an ab injury or whatever the hell. Like, certainly not holding that against him. But Josh Hart went from regular season 32% 3-point shooter to 45 or 47% from
he became Klay Thompson
over 6 games.
Right, yeah.
And then right back to a guy who couldn't make open threes to save his life throughout the Pacers series. Like this is a conversation for another day. One of my dad's friends for a long time, he's fallen out of love with the NBA and his position. He's like, oh, I grew up with Wilt Chamberlain and blah, blah, blah. His position has been they should get rid of the 3-point line. And I honestly, the further we get into like the 3-point heavy era where Caleb Martin is swinging a series, or Josh Hart is swinging a series. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm there. They're just like for a year, like the year that they shortened the 3-point line and Michael Jordan had his best 3-point shooting season ever. Maybe for a year, just like throw out the 3-point line and see how that compromises everybody's. Because people will still value spacing, right? Like the ability to stretch a team out and hit open jumpers and all that. But like, let's just see what happens. Just so it's something different than, hey, this team's role players went crazy. Anyway, that's immaterial to the conversation we're having today.
But where I will, like, in kind of branching off that, and I think this is a major difference between the NFL and the NBA, and sitting in the bottom seat, I probably have to bring this up, is like sample size is so significant in the sense that in the NFL, let's take the postseason. Mm-hmm. One game does not provide, the variance one game allows is crazy to think about. Like if the Eagles had a 7-game series against the Falcons in January 2018, I'm not sure they win, right? But if the Pacers-Knicks play one game and the Pacers shoot the way they did last night, the Pacers win the series. I mean, and if you think about the NCAA tournament compared to the NBA playoffs, in the NCAA tournament, Kentucky can lose because they face a hot shooter on one night. In the NBA, over a 7-game series, the best team typically wins, unless there's an injury or something of that sort. And I think back to growing up in, a huge NBA fan, I have that image in my head at the Dikembe Mutombo against the Sonics, back when it was a 5-game series.
Like a life-changing event that they won that series.
Yeah. It's a 5-game series allowed for more variance. Now, unless you have a situation like Derrick Rose gets hurt against the Sixers in 2011, mm-hmm. You're typically seeing the team that's markedly better winning the game.
Yeah, and it's funny, Kyle, Zach and I, the first time we did TV together, similar type of thing, not as relaxed.
Nice little humble brag there. Yeah, I'm a big TV guy.
We did a little TV thing, and what was that? Was that the Fultz year?
That was the Fultz year.
That was the Fultz year. Yeah, that was that summer.
Yep.
The Fultz year. The trade happened. And we had to stay on for like another hour of breaking down what should they do and should you trade for Jason Tatum? Should you look at Lonzo Ball and the Markelle Fultz piece of it? Are you moving up just for him? And years later, we know how much that has changed the trajectory of the franchise because of that type of move.
Exactly. Like your high leverage decisions matter so much. And then the T-Wolves won the lottery, 3 times now or they wanted the Towns year. They wanted the Bennett year. I'm sorry, they didn't want the Bennett year. They wanted the Edwards year, and they want the Wiggins year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And 2 of those picks, Towns and Edwards, turned into foundational players. They traded Love for the number 1 pick that was Bennett. It does not work out. Wiggins, they end up trading for Russell. Neither move kind of pans out, but hitting on Anthony Edwards, who by the way was not the consensus number 1 overall pick that year.
No, he was not.
Right, and
there basically was no consensus.
You had LaMelo Ball, you had James Wiseman. Who am I missing? Those were kind of
that was really it.
Yeah, those 3 were in the mix there, and the fact that they take Edwards and he turns into a star, that changes everything. Like Sixers history,
and it changed Cat's trajectory too. Like I was discussing with people last night. Cat has had a negative reputation around the league, including like people who work in front offices, guys on benches, whatever. They've looked at him as, he's soft. He can't do this. He can't defend. This season, thanks to Ant's ascent, thanks to Rudy's help, like it has helped change the perception and the conversation around Cat in a super meaningful way. So the context around these guys matters a great deal.
If you had me on the show when PHLY kicked off back in September, and you asked me where's Towns playing a year from now, I would have said the Knicks.
Yep.
I would have said like the deck was stacked for Leon Rose to go trade for Towns. Now you look at it, Edwards, who was really good a year ago, takes the leap, 25-game scorer, like one of the best players in the NBA. And Towns fits in well with him. It's kind of like the number 2 guy. He's able to kind of mesh with Gobert, but everything works because they hit on the number 1 pick in the draft. And I was watching that press conference last night. Towns has been there, 9 years now?
Yeah, he said 9.
Yeah, and for the past 8 years, Towns was viewed the way Kyle just said, like this player who's tantalizing talent, but isn't someone who's your number 1 guy. And now here they are. They just beat the defending champs. And I would say, I don't know what the betting market says, but they're probably the favorites to win it all right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the alpha is the alpha. We know who it is. We knew who it was. It was just a matter of did Towns allow it to be that way, and I think he is giving that up. He knows exactly who the alpha of that team is at this point. But if we're talking about making that money and putting some money in the betting odds, and all of that stuff, let's make sure we talk about where you save that money once you hit. If Minnesota does, in fact, win that title, you got to place that money in the TrueMark Financial Credit Union and make sure that it's safe, because as you stack up on that money and you get ready for the offseason and your summer trips, you know where to go. TrueMark Financial. When you join a credit union like TrueMark Financial, you become part owner, which means profits come back to you instead of going to the shareholders. Better rates, lower fees, a better return on savings, and more flexible options with all the same digital tools and tech to make sure our lives are easier. TrueMark has local roots, headquartered in Fort Washington with 24 branches in the Philadelphia area. I often bring up the Upper Darby branch that I will drive by so many times. I still do. My daughter goes to school in the area. So as a result, I see that TrueMark Financial Credit Union right there in that shopping center very, very often. So if that's the one closest near you, head on out to sign up and say that we sent you there. They serve our community and our people right here at home. Becoming a member of a credit union has so many benefits over being a customer at a bank. It's a total no-brainer for you. Head over to TrueMark.com/PHLY to learn more or to find a branch near you. That's TrueMark.com/PHLY, federally insured by the NCUA. And I have to tell you, it's Father's Day coming up, right? We don't get a lot of love like the moms do. We don't. I have my 3 daughters. I get nice gifts from my kids, but we don't see the commercials, Zach, that we see for the moms like we should, for the dads, right? We don't get all of that stuff. With that being said, if you want to, ladies out there, if you're looking to buy your significant other a nice gift and you want to make sure that you have everything squared away for Father's Day, we're giving you time. It's not until next month. Blink if you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift yet, ladies, or even the guys out there. Yeah, so we thought today's episode brought to you by our good friends from Manscaped, leaders in the below-the-waist grooming. Maybe your pops has a bush on his face since the 70s, something like that. And that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted
bush
the total,
on his face.
He needs to shave
What a concept.
Has crafted the total package for this special day, whether it's for the boys downstairs, the beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there. Manscaped has the best bases covered for you. Head over to manscaped.com. Get 20% off plus free shipping with code PHLY from daddy to zaddy. Trust Manscaped. All right? You know the beard trimmer that your dad's been using since you were in grade school. Well, it's time to get him a new one. Yeah, it probably needs to go. Needs upgrading. Introducing the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, the complete beard maintenance kit for all the bearded kings out there. James Harden, he's on vacation. Maybe he can get one to take with him. This is all-in-one kit. Comes with the Beard Hedger, Manscaped, most advanced beard trimmer, as well as the shampoo, conditioner, oil, and balm for his beard. It also comes with the brush, comb, and scissors so he can have the style of beard, mustache the true gentleman likes to have. And when you're in Philadelphia, often you see a lot around the league where the players have the beards that are just real full. And it became the Philly beard, even in different places. You see a lot of players in different teams in all the leagues. They have their full beard now. It's the Philly beard. You want to make sure that you get the Manscaped for the shampoo, the conditioner, the oil, and everything to trim it the way that you need it. So with that, we also know Father's Day is also the perfect time for your old man to stop stealing his wife's. Yes, stop stealing your wife's kit, nail clippers.
You're not
all
going
of that
to daddy
stuff.
to zaddy with your wife's
No, I'm
kit.
not. And finally have a kid of his own for the last him a lifetime. You want to make sure your nails and things are groomed where you don't look all dirty and get that stuff done. So get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PHLY at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PHLY. Never forget where you came from, if you know what I mean. Happy Father's Day from Manscaped.
Daddy to zaddy just really sending over the edge for me. But listen.
Got to get the nail clippers, though.
Devon,
Can't have dirty nails.
I have another friend I want to mention.
You have another friend?
Our friends at Shady Rays.
Look at that.
This is our Future is Bright segment, everybody. Let's put on our rose-colored glasses and explain why the future is bright for all the Denver Nuggets and all their fans that are now on vacation. Brought to you by Shady Rays. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY at checkout or 35% off of polarized sunglasses. So, promise you guys I would talk about Denver at some point. We will probably do some serious analysis a little later on. But back in late January, I sat here on this show, minding my business, hanging out with Derek. I believe Devon might not have been on the show that night. A bunch of Denver fans decided they wanted to troll the chat of our show because the Denver Nuggets beat the mighty Pat Beverly and Paul Reed. At which point, I told Nuggets fans they had a great team, and I simply mocked them for what is a clear case of little brother syndrome. It's okay, guys. I get it. I live in a city that's in the shadow of New York City. I know what it looks like when you have an inferiority complex, even when you can't admit it. But by reminding you that you have one, it made a bunch of you very, very mad. Made repeated attempts to get me fired publicly and privately, some of you repeatedly, simply because I trolled you right back and I hit you where it hurt the most. Now, let's be clear. Truth be told, I respect plenty about the Denver Nuggets as an organization. I respect plenty of their players. For example, we talked about Aaron Gordon on this show. Aaron Gordon plays in a way that shows he's about the right things. He will sacrifice to try to win. I respect Nikola Jokic. He was a traffic cone at times last night in that game, right? But he played 47 minutes in a loss, showed great pride as a defending champion. Nothing wrong with that. Put up a bunch of numbers. So I don't have a lot of smoke for the Denver Nuggets themselves. But for the last 4 months, there are Nuggets fans that have made a part of their personal brand to troll me, as if the results of Sixers and Nuggets games reflect on me rather than those teams because of one segment on one show 4 months ago. And I will continue to laugh at your sorry asses now. I will continue to laugh at you in June, in July, and in August. You guys are down so bad. I saw one of you on Twitter last night flexing that, excuse me, flexing that you spent $7,000 on a replica Nuggets championship ring because you thought something that the Denver Nuggets did reflects on you and your accomplishments as a person. That's pretty sad. I watch you puff your chests out. All cap celebrations on Twitter, on your podcasts, on TV, because the Nuggets beat the Lakers team that I told you measured yourselves by. Like the little brothers that you are. Those victory laps don't feel like they're hitting the same right now. You came to my mentions. You had the temerity to mock Joel Embiid while he's playing through injuries, only for Jamal Murray to play through injuries in the second round. And the only time that you tried to cop a plea for Jamal Murray is when they lost. And now you know what that feels like, to watch a guy who can't give everything he has, but is still trying, and you got to put the cape on. I know it hurts, because I know it's the exact same thing you've been crushing Sixers people for years and years. And many of you said you would see me in June, and you will. I'll be enjoying what is shaping up to be a very enjoyable NBA Finals, no matter who comes out of these series. You will still be in your feelings, probably trying to pretend that you care about the dog shit Colorado Rockies team that you have to watch, and your life will have no meaning until the Broncos set up training camp. The one Nuggets guy I will have a laugh at today, along with you, is Mike Malone. Mostly because he is the embodiment of you soft motherfuckers that he's been pandering to for the last 12 months. To paraphrase a famous American philosopher, Mike Malone was running around like he's Pac when times were good, only to sit at that podium on Sunday night and cry about a reporter's question because he was faced with the fact that his team, your team, blew the biggest lead in the history of Game 7s. That is a tough break. Maybe you should have gotten your best player a rest while you were up 15 to 20 points in the second half. And maybe then you wouldn't have to be confronted with your failures in such immediate fashion after a historic record-setting choke job on your home floor at altitude where you thought you were unbeatable and lost 3 out of 4 to a team that has not been out of the second round since Kevin Garnett's birthday 20 years ago. So listen, here's what I'll leave you with. When the rest of you are sitting at your desk today with that sinking feeling in your stomach, when you're in those Jeep Grand Cherokees that I know half of you sorry motherfuckers are driving out there in Denver, trying to smile through the tears, think about what's happening next. I just want you to remember it can and it will get worse. When KCP leaves your team this summer or becomes so prohibitively expensive that it screws up Denver's cap sheet, it is going to be worse. When the guy that you've dubbed the greatest offensive player in NBA history and is closer than you'll care to admit to retiring to play with his horses, it will get worse. Your team's supporting cast is so frail that players on the bench in the middle of the series were texting and leaking stories to former NBA players to make excuses for why they were about to lose the series while they still had a chance to win it. Because deep down, they are fucking losers, just like all of you who tried to get me fired and failed. So listen, if attempting to troll me helps you to cope with the fact that you have to live vicariously through other people's achievements, you go on and post your little hearts out. Just remember, the dream is going to be dead for you before you even realize that it's over.
The future is bright. There you have it.
Thank you, Shady Rays.
We appreciate it. Absolutely. Good stuff, Kyle, as always. And before Kyle even went to the Mike Malone piece, as much as we enjoy watching them as a basketball team and all that, I was going to go to Zach. Zach, did you see the press conference with Mike Malone saying stupid ass questions?
I think Kyle, by the way, needs to kind of like pick a side. He shouldn't be so down the middle on this. Yeah, I did see that press conference.
Yes.
And yeah, look, it's an emotional charge. You just lost the game. I don't think it's an unreasonable question to ask.
I don't think so either. No.
I don't like to kind of legislate on like what, I like honesty and emotion from those that I cover. And he provided emotion, certainly. But I thought it was a reasonable question, and I still didn't get an answer on it. Right? I mean, perhaps it could have been phrased differently, but nonetheless, it was a question that should have been answered.
Yeah, absolutely should have been. It absolutely should have been answered. It was in the moment. Yeah. Frustration was there.
Again, the biggest blow lead in the history of Game 7s. You're going to get asked about it.
You're going to get asked about it,
man.
And you can't. My only thing is this too. When Mike Malone, no, I'm Michael. So when you have that type of bravado about yourself, then you get back to a spot like this, you win a championship, and you bite back at them last year, you wear the chains and all of that stuff when you win. In times like this, you also got to be a pro too, and you have to answer that question.
And look, to be clear, he eventually was, said Minnesota was the better team, all that. One of the reasons I really respect Jokic.
And then he went, but.
He did do the butt.
He did the butt.
One of the reasons I really respect Jokic, and I actually think this was a fair criticism of Joel when he's had his low moments in the past. Jokic is always bigging up the other team and the other guys. Went out of his way to be like, I love Mike Conley, one of the most underrated players in the league. Shouting out Ant-Man. The thing that I really disliked about where the discourse has gone between Sixers fans and Nuggets fans, or really Embiid fans and Jokic fans, because it's not all the teams. Some of this is random people all over the place, people in Serbia that are tweeting at me in not English that they hate.
That's got big following. Serbia's watching.
He does. But one of the things I hate is Joel and Jokic both respect the shit out of each other, recognize each other's greatness. It doesn't have to be an either or. They're two great players at the same position who do it in different ways, right? Like Jokic is great in ways that Joel is not. Joel is great in ways that Jokic is not. And it does not have to be you choose this guy, you choose that guy. It's very silly stuff, honestly. But all that being said, the part that I loved the most after the game was just seeing all the same things that Sixers fans say when Joel goes out and scores 30 whatever points, has this many rebounds, plays great defense, and wears down because he's got to do too much. Everyone's copping pleas for Jokic. Like, just look in the mirror.
Yep.
It's the same thing. Like, all these guys at the highest levels need help from the rest of their guys in various ways, whether that's you need it on offense, you need it in some way. And I just thought it was delicious irony that their season ended for the exact reasons we've sat on the show and sat on other platforms and said, that's why the Sixers are going home.
And the part two with that, man, is because listening to the broadcast, they're saying Jokic is not sitting down. He has played the entire game. So you saw the fatigue really starting to set in. And yeah, you need that help. And if you're going to call out, sure, it just happened to Embiid, it seems like more than anybody else. But guess what? It just happened to you. You saw it. You were impacted by it as a Nuggets fan. So now what do you say? Yeah, of course you're going to go back. Well, we got a championship. Of course you do. That's fantastic. And that's why we sit here and talk about it the way we shouldn't have got it, given it up in 21. Should have beat the Atlanta Hawks last season in the Game 6. Should have advanced. Maybe that was your pathway. But you do need help. And sometimes those things do get in the way when fatigue or injury does, in fact, impact you advancing.
Well, I was reading a lot of the Nuggets coverage coming into the season, and there was this talk of like potential dynasty and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's what jumps out to me when I watched this series in particular, but the season, how premature that was. It's so hard. It's so hard to win a title, right? And especially, you know, I saw Jamal Murray's quote last night, and I thought it was a good one, that they're back to being the hunters, right? Like when you're the team that has the target on the back, which the Nuggets were this season really for the first time, it changes everything. The T-Wolves were constructed to be able to beat the Nuggets.
By the exact guy who built the Nuggets.
Exactly.
It's like,
and that's
what a story that is, by the way.
So, I get it. I participate in this type of coverage. You know, I covered the Eagles in 2018 and then coming off the Super Bowl last year. Like, just because, you know, Peyton Watson shows some promise in the preseason, you're not positioned for, there's so much that has to go right for you to win, and there's so much that could go wrong for you to lose. And it's that when you watch how the Nuggets went out in 7 here, frankly, it should make you appreciate like what the Warriors did for a decade, and then you go back to, the Heat, the Bulls, the Lakers, the Spurs.
LeBron going to 8 straight finals.
Yeah.
Like that is a crazy achievement.
Like the Nuggets were outstanding last year. They earned that title. They should be proud of that. But in order to be talking about a dynasty. You gotta win more than one, or like you gotta threaten to win more than one.
And Jokic said that last night in the press conference. You said all the good things that he was talking about. He was asked about, is this a rivalry right here between these two teams? And he said, yeah, they know how to beat us. They simply know how to beat us. So last season when they played them, it looked like they had a chance to beat them also because they played them well, but they finally got them. Being up 2-0, tying up at 2-2, down 3-2, and for them to come back and win the last 2 games, that's very impressive against the champs, as you just mentioned, being the hunters, now back to being the hunted now. They snatched that away from you. And now you have to find a way once again to get back to that spot. And that's not easy, where you have the Porter conversation now. Should they be looking to move him? What's going on with that franchise and what they're going to do? Now things get a little bit different when you get knocked on your back and you now have to get
lose
back
one
up.
series, and people are trying to trade the guys who help you win the title. Just
look at that.
That's a tough business.
What is their move though? Like, because the whole talking point about the Nuggets last year, and frankly, you heard Embiid talk about this, was how much continuity was valuable to them. That they went through those wars, for lack of a better term, with the team that won the title, and then they finally broke through. And then this year they ran it back with most of those guys, right? Mm-hmm. I know they didn't have Bruce Brown, but they ran it back with most of those guys, right? So when you look at that, you say, well, is an overreaction that the trade Porter? Do you count on Christian Braun taking the next, or I'm sorry, Christian Brown taking the next step. Things
I
of
always
that
want to
nature.
call him Braun. It messes with me every time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm curious about. Is like you can look at this and you can say tough matchup, tough year. They went through the rigors in the regular season. Those guys played a lot of minutes. They were in Game 7. It could have gone either way, right? But or do you say that they need to make adjustments to the way that roster is constructed?
Yeah, that's going to be a great question for Calvin Booth to try to figure that part out. Because the guy, as you said, Tim Connolly on the other side, Minnesota, just snatched it away from him.
And by the way,
Built both of
Tim
them.
Connolly might be on the open market. He's got an out based on what happens with this ownership situation in Minnesota.
Which is
maybe
still,
he'll build a Timberwolves killer this time. You never know.
which is weird, by the way.
He'll
The
get
whole
hired
thing
over,
with that.
He'll get hired over your boy Troy Weaver and
Weaves.
I don't have
Please.
another rant left in me today, I don't think. But you know what?
What do we have?
If you want to go see one of these Western Conference Finals games, you happen to be in Minnesota, I got people in Minnesota. I got people, as Ludacris once said, in different area codes.
There you go.
He didn't use the word people, though. You can use our good friends at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. So once all the schedules come in for the conference finals, eventually the finals, right up to that last second, if you just happen to be in town, if you're someone who's, maybe you're scrounging together a little bit of money, it's a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation opportunity. My team's in the finals, my team's in the conference finals, whatever you want to do. You will get the right deals, last-minute deals, the best prices, and views from your seat before you buy with Game Time because they take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Look, they have last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It's easy to find tickets for every type of event in your area. Zach, I don't know if you're going to get swept into this. I've been saying to these guys, not only about going to sporting events together, we might be going to the theater, maybe seeing a ballet, maybe do a little team bonding.
I like comedy shows. You can get
there
that.
we go, comedy show. There's plenty. There's a few venues around here, although also some big tours that come through town, play at the Wells Fargo Center. You never know, but if you use Game Time, you know that you have their best price guarantee. Seat views give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And with their ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. That is incredible. So save up to 60% off of last-minute deals on all the events you want. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
No
Shout out to
tickets
Charles Barkley.
Madison Square Garden, though. No tickets there.
We might be talking about them next. But if I'm going to talk anymore on this show after talking nonstop for a long time there, I think I'm going to need a refreshing soda.
You need a soda?
What do you think, Devon? Maybe an Olipop?
No Olipop?
Olipop is the new kind of soda with only 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of fiber per can. Olipop's available online in almost 30,000 retailers nationwide, including the most recent launch at all Wawa stores. You can scoop a classic root beer or strawberry vanilla at a Wawa near you. My people in the chat already know.
Yes.
I can't remember whose name it was in the beginning of the chat, said, it's a bad day to be an Olipop. You are absolutely right. I'm going to slam some of those. I know my girl Winona is going to drink some. I know some of my other people in the chat have kept their eye out for Olipop in the stores. And look, it'll give you the same benefits that I feel like I've gotten for it. Great taste without all the guilt you feel with drinking soda. And there are plenty of classic flavors, from vintage cola to classic root beer, orange squeeze, classic grape, strawberry vanilla, cream soda, cherry cola, watermelon lime, all over the place. Use the code PHLY20 for 20% off of your next Olipop order. The discount only applies to one-time orders, not to subscription orders. Olipop is sold online at drinkolipop.com and on Amazon, and it's available in almost 30,000 retailers nationwide, including Wawa, Target, Sprouts, Wegmans, ShopRite, and Go Puff.
Yes, go get that Olipop. Before we get to the Madison Square Garden team that's no longer playing, that New York squad, Zach, I got to ask you about Daryl Morey.
Yeah.
And your thoughts on Daryl Morey. You've been around Howie Roseman, a lot of success. Do you see any, what, if at all, similarities do you see in the two? How would you say you look from afar at what Daryl Morey does and if he does a good job or not?
Yeah, well, I go back to Morey's Houston teams. I understand that the league's evolved since then, but I think overall Morey's done a really good job as a general manager in the league. I think he's made some moves in Philly that have left more to be desired. Right? He was dealt a great hand in having Embiid. He's dealt a tough hand in the Simmons situation. I don't know if he navigated that well enough. Right? And then now he was there to draft Maxey. And I think they've made a few moves on the margins that have been beneficial. But I think this offseason is going to be critical. And I obviously have opinions on what they should do this offseason.
Well, that's what I want. The only reason you're on this show is because I want to know what the ZB plan is for building out the Sixers from where they're at right now.
Yeah.
Who are you signing? Who are you trading for?
Well, I heard you guys talk last week about Donovan Mitchell. And that would be my top target. Is I look at Donovan Mitchell as from an age profile, from a playing profile, from the ability to play with the 2 stars you have here, that would make sense to me. Now, if you can't get Mitchell, I would be less enthused about trading your assets for a Jimmy Butler. I do like Ingram. I would be curious what the price is for Ingram. I'm generally not in favor of giving up the 4 first-round picks and 4 pick swaps or 3 first-rounders and 3 pick swaps unless, A, you're confident that you're re-signing the player and that you feel that he's making that material difference on winning the title. So short of getting Donovan getting Mitchell, the move I would make then would be, frankly, to go after Paul George because you don't have to give up the pick assets. As far as navigating the draft, I'm curious to see. I know this. I kind of need to let this opinion ferment a bit. But Zach Edey would be interesting to me just from having.
Oh, you and Vince are on Zach Edey Island.
Center, but I would frankly want a more high upside player.
Yeah.
Right. When you're talking about that 16th pick, but I think when the Sixers have gone through so many different variations of backup bigs, I think what this year showed is that you probably need some type of stability if Embiid goes down, or I should say when Embiid goes down, right? And so,
unfortunately, that's the reality.
I mean, as like Zach Edey, what he's done over the past 3 years in college basketball, he's probably one of the best college players over the past 2 decades, frankly. Now the NBA is a different game, but I would be intrigued there. Although I need to see how the rest of the board would fall. But overall, it's really what third star are you adding? Donovan Mitchell would be my plan A, and then my plan B would be Paul George.
You have no issues with the backcourt being small?
I don't.
Just because of the scoring?
Because of the scoring and because of the defensive versatility there. Because I think that what you do need to do there is round out your bench a little more to have a ball stopper, who can come in. But I just think I've seen Mitchell doing that. Now you go back to the bubble with the way he played for Utah then. Mm-hmm. Before he went down this year, he was averaging like what he was doing in Cleveland this year was outstanding. I was talking to Kyle last week. I like Darius Garland, but I would rather Mitchell as a fit for the Sixers than Garland. So Mitchell would be my number 1, and then Paul George would be my number 2, based on the fact that you don't have to give up your assets for him. Okay.
All right. Interesting. The Brandon Ingram one was interesting too.
Yeah. Now, the Pelicans team this year, he didn't have the year I expected. Zion took more of a leap this year. Mm-hmm. But I would also look for, I liked your show last week about like the Aaron Gordon change of scenery type. I'm curious, like Josh Giddey from the Thunder. Had
boy.
A bad series.
Oh, no.
Had a bad series. Okay.
Oh, no.
Touching a nerve here.
Well, Vince, our coworker Vince, was trying to trade Joel Embiid for Josh Giddey before the season.
All right, I wouldn't do that.
All right,
yeah,
to be fair to Vince, because I don't want to misconstrue his opinion, it was Josh Giddey, I think like Lou Dort and picks. I was like, well, congratulations, you'll win 29 games and have a bunch of picks.
You see, what you don't realize, this is all like a way for me to try to get a raise from Vince. So I'm just bringing up like the other guys Vince wants, and then I'll
Except
go
for
to
the
Vince and say,
Embiid part.
Yeah. So Vince, I agreed with you, right? But no, I'm not fully baked on the Josh Giddey, Zach.
My
Edey
guy says
plans.
no, Zach. No.
Yeah, actually, if John Gonzalez is watching right now, Josh Giddey hurt my fantasy team quite a bit this year. So,
boy.
Yeah, but there was a lot going on with him this year beyond.
And I think that's where a lot of people are like, I don't know about that. And then he's not
He was
shooting the
getting booed in
basketball.
Philadelphia for those reasons,
But
I
his
think,
past
more
2
than the
years-
basketball reasons.
Yeah, his or I should say his first 2 years, he was a versatile.
He took a nosedive
He
this
was a
season.
versatile guard
Yeah.
who could, he could play 1 through 3, 1 through 4 to a certain
He
extent.
can do a lot of things.
So,
Yep.
but I would look for that Aaron Gordon type player, the change of scenery type
If
guy.
you don't have the Mitchell and George
exactly.
as the options. Okay.
But to get back to the original thing is that I think Morey does a good job, whether you like it or not, at like a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. And the analogy that I use is that, and that's where he compares to Howie. Is Howie's view is that the league is like a bell-shaped curve, and you just don't want to be in the middle of that curve, right? And so you need to be a little fearless sometimes, but also he doesn't go into something unprepared. So, for instance, when they missed out on Byron Jones, who they wanted to sign, and that didn't work out for them. They pivot, they signed Javon Hargrave, they trade for Darius Slay. And the alternative, you think, in 2015, when Howie wasn't in charge, when the Eagles' plan that offseason was to go after Byron Maxwell and Devin McCourty and Frank Gore, and they traded McCoy, and then they wanted to re-sign Macklin. When those moves didn't work out, they were left with this money. They didn't know what to do. They signed DeMarco Murray, and they didn't properly vet that. So I think Morey does
Ryan
a good
Matthews
job.
was just enough.
I think Morey does a good job of having a plan A, plan B, plan C.
Yeah. When they did that, the Ryan Matthews thing happened first.
Yep.
Leave it alone. You don't need to go out there and get the mark. Come on, man. D'Amico Ryan.
Never sign a Cowboy again. That's my completely unbiased
Murray,
opinion,
man.
my impartial. On the Paul George point, I guess where are you at in general on trading that? I know you brought up Zach Edey, but trading 16, because to me, part of the value, like let's say Mitchell's off the table. The intel that is out there right now is suggesting he's probably going to sign that extension there, and that the other pieces are going to move. Now, whether that happens, who knows? We'll see. Like it's easy to say, yeah, he's going to do it, and putting pen to paper is different. But let's say that happens and that Paul George is the best option. In my mind, the value of getting Paul George is not just getting Paul George. It's that you have those picks that then you can say, hey, Chicago, we'll give you 16 and something else for Alex Caruso.
Sure.
We'll send, I don't know, maybe we send 16 and something else to Brooklyn not for Mikal, because that'll be out of the question at that point. But for a couple of those wings that they have, like try to load up on the in-between guys, build a really defensively sound, and not worry about, having to develop somebody. And is Nick Nurse going to play this guy and all that? So I guess if they do get the big name guy, the big money guy, and someone like Paul George, does that change how you approach the draft? And like when it's on with the Eagles, how much does that, how do things change based on like one big free agent?
Yeah, it's a good question because it goes back to what we said earlier. Like the NFL draft, you kind of look at it almost as isolated from your roster building for that year. When in the NBA, you need to look at the draft pick as an asset more so than like the player development part of it, because the odds are against the number 16 pick in the draft becoming a starter in the NBA. Whereas in the NFL, your picks in the first 2 rounds are expected to be not just starters, but like high end, top of the roster players for you. Yeah. So I think that in the NBA, you're more aggressive trading those picks, number one. And I frankly think that like in the NFL, for instance, teams are much more careful with future picks than in the NBA. You don't see the 3 future picks and the pick swaps. Yeah. So I would look to trade 16 unless you think there's a guy who can step into your rotation. I don't think you're going to draft a player at 16 who you say, all right, 3 years from now, this guy's going to be a foundation piece for us. And then the other major difference, like this might be a surface level analysis. But like in the NFL, you're drafting a player who's played in college for 3 years, who is physically at a different point, body wise than in the NBA when you're taking. I love the NBA draft, but the one thing that I can't speak with education about, it's the foreign players. I don't watch them the way Derek does, right? And so,
frankly, I don't either. Like that's to me, that's the hardest thing about. We can have a frame of reference for this guy's good in the Big Ten or the ACC or the SEC, whatever it is. It's like, all right, I know what a good player there looks like and maybe how that translates to the NBA. When the Sixers are going through the rebuild, and I'm trying to watch like Megalex and some of these other teams and like the Adriatic League or even like the high end leagues, like Luka obviously was in the Spanish ACB, and that's I think most people would agree that's probably the best league in the world outside of the NBA. And even so, people whose entire jobs are based on scouting and doing that kind of stuff, we're like, well, this guy isn't athletic enough to make it. And there was that translation issue that we're talking about. So that part is borderline impossible.
Well, I think about the Okafor year in particular, when Porzingis goes 4, Exum goes 5.
Yep.
And neither of those players I had a frame of reference on to say like, all right, the Sixers should have done that. And so you look at this year's draft, I can talk to you about Dillingham and Shepard from Kentucky, right? Like I can talk to you about a number of the different college players, even though this isn't a great college draft. But if 4 of the first 7 players are from overseas, I don't have that frame of reference. And that's a way of saying,
like those names in the past where, to your point, Porzingis and Exum, we at least knew who they were, though, from paying attention to what was going on through the process pre-draft.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like so to bring it to the Sixers, I was an intern at the Inquirer. This was 2007. And it's the year the Sixers took Rodney Carney.
Yeah.
But
Memphis.
But they ended up trading. But they got Carney. The guy they drafted originally, I'm testing my memory here, might have been Jerry Welsh, if that name sounds correct.
Jerry Welsh. Yeah.
Jerry. I'm bad with pronunciations. Mm-hmm. That's my bad. But as Bo could tell you, but that was a big deal. Like the Sixers hadn't drafted a foreign guy in the first round in like X amount, or they hadn't drafted a foreign guy in X amount of time. So so that's a way of saying like this year's in the NFL, they're more known quantities that you're drafting. Draft picks are more valuable because the Eagles took Will Shipley in the 4th round this year. He was a 3-year starter at Clemson, who was a 5-star recruit, who like you have a strong sample size on him. Trevor Keegan, their 5th round pick, went to Michigan for 5 years, played for the national champions, right? In the NBA, draft picks are just fundamentally different than in the NFL.
And that's why when we talked about it last week, we know you watched, but we mentioned if you do 16, you stay there. We mentioned the player Devon Carter from Providence as a 3-year player at Providence, a guard with some decent size, but he has played. He's not just coming in as a freshman as one of those top guys.
And by the way, we didn't talk about this last week, but teams have been having more success lately by the good teams by focusing on those types of players like Jalen Williams at Santa Clara. Desmond Bain coming out of, he was at TCU, right? Memphis drafts him, and he pretty much immediately is not an impact guy, but was a good player, and now he's taken that next step to. And the conventional wisdom for a while there was don't draft older players because their upside's tapped out and all that. And it didn't quite factor for who has untapped upside, who was a late bloomer, who's a guy that maybe is just hiding in plain sight, that whether it's where he played in high school or he just didn't get the right offers, he wasn't seen, he wasn't playing for the right AAU teams, whatever it is. And I think teams are now finding, like, look, if you can get the best player and they're also 18, 19 and they have the most upside, like, you still want the younger guy at the end of the day for those reasons. But there are a lot of teams that are now kind of recentering and saying, you don't always have to take the lottery ticket. Sometimes you take the guy who's a double rather than a home run swing. And that guy, by bolstering your rotation between the stars you already have, like a Joel, like a Tyrese, then you're strengthening the program, and it makes it easier to take a swing on maybe a higher risk guy down the road.
And it's a great point. And, to like bring it back to the Eagles, Howie Roseman would tell you that if you're trying to model your team building strategy off the team that just won, you're probably like 2 years behind, right? And so it's incumbent upon Daryl Morey to figure out, all right, where's the inefficiency that you can take advantage of? You know, I think back to some of the Sixers' great like second round picks. You know, when they took Lou Williams, there was probably some type of inefficiency there for high school players in the second round. You know, Monte Ellis was a second round pick then too, and then that kind of pivoted, and so you need to, you know, in recent years, a guy like Desmond Bane's a great example where you go for the more mature player. If it's pivoting in that direction, maybe you go back to the profile of like what Jaden McDaniels or Naz Reid were, former 5-star guys who are just teaming with potential, but they don't have that type of college resume. Yep. I don't know the answer to that.
So on that point, I think if there are going to be a lot of people, and we've discussed it on the show, the idea of the too big or like the front court heavy team, and Minnesota is obviously the great example, but I think Denver is too, right? Because Gordon is this like really modern, versatile 4. But I think if you're looking at Minnesota and you're trying to replicate what they're doing, that's a little silly. Like what you want to do is build a team where, so Denver's whole strategy, right, was trying to attack, like Jokic attack in the post, one-on-one, try to draw the help. And ideally you get to leave Gordon in the dunker. He's there as the release valve. You get those little layups, dunks, whatever, like easy buckets, because Jokic is a great passer and you have an incredible athlete around the rim that he can finish against everybody. Well, what Minnesota succeeded at doing when they won is neutralizing that, because Gobert got to sit there. Aaron Gordon, if he can hit threes, wipes all that away, right? He just sits in the corner and he bombs away on you and he's going to shoot you out of that coverage. So I think like the role that Tobias Harris was in, but just someone who plays it better, someone who's a more willing shooter, frankly, a better shooter than he has been in bigger moments, a more versatile defender, a better rebounder, like that player is super valuable to me from a Sixers perspective. But I also think it's going to be the key to unlocking these, you know, the 2 rim protector lineups. Like Boston can play them too, right? They have Porzingis and Horford. They brought in Xavier Tillman, another big guy who they haven't used him much, but they can cycle through options because their guys are, maybe they're not true centers. Like they're all giving up size to a Joel Embiid, but they're all enough of a center and bring enough of those center skills that you get the value of them defensively while also playing 5 out on the other end of the floor. And you spread it out and it's like we have to guard all these guys one-on-one on the perimeter. And so I think the key next to Joel, but also around the league, is like that type of guy at the 4. Like the qualities of a traditional power forward, tough, rebounding presence, good defender, all that, but also has to be able to put it on the floor and shoot and do all that. And unfortunately, that in many cases is like, if it's not a max player, it's a $30-35 million player in most examples.
And that's frankly where, like the NFL and the NBA, the comparison is how much situation matters. When you get past the stars, I keep hearing Sixers fans say, Josh Hart. Well, Josh Hart he's on his 4th team now? Yeah. Right? Lakers, Pelicans, Blazers. And Dante DiVincenzo was a free agent twice now, right? And so the situation, the players you play with matter so much. And like outside of your top 3, it's all about fit.
Yep. Let's get to a couple of super chats that we have in there, and then we'll get to the Knicks, since they are also with the Shady Rays.
Well, speaking of, looks like Coach Lowell Ricketts has the super chat saying, Kyle, now do a roast of the Knicks fans.
Laid it out there perfectly.
I'll say, I don't have as much smoke for them because Knicks fans were annoying the last few weeks, but they weren't at the level of the Denver fans, at least for me.
Plus, they shifted their attention elsewhere. They weren't really,
I will say this.
They were fun.
It was a little funny to me watching them basically like cart the Knicks off on like a card of honor because they just because they were all banged up, right? Like, you're the fucking 2 seed, man. Like, you should have won the series. I understand I don't expect them in that game 7 with how banged up they were. If you looked at OG Anunoby, credit to that guy for trying to play. He very clearly should not have been cleared in the first place.
He was like on what's the
an elliptical? Are you doing?
That's how he was walking.
I thought he looked like he had a peg leg, like he was a pirate, like shiver me timbers out there, couldn't run. So God. I'm certainly not going to criticize him. I can't I was going to make a tweet yesterday about John Starks passing the torch to Brunson, and then Brunson got hurt, and I was like, yeah, that's mean-spirited. Like, Jalen Brunson had a great playoff run that just so happened to be derailed at the end by injuries. I just thought it was, I think New York fans and Philly fans and Boston fans, for that matter, very similar in demeanor and what they value and what they appreciate, all that. And I was not expecting, they got their fucking doors blown off in that game. They gave up the best shooting game in history to an opponent.
70% field goal percentage from the floor.
And they're giving
70.
I get they fought hard. I get all that. But like, it has to be at least competitive to give them a standing O.
Well, when they weren't in the spot for so many years, and for them to lock on these last 2 seasons and then see they finally have their franchise guy in Jalen Brunson and all that. So that
I get it.
Look, it's New York, and New York will do that.
It was a valiant effort. I get why they came together around this team. The one thing I want to caution these people, and this is like a genuine word of advice. I can see you going through the stages of grief with Tom Thibodeau already.
Oh, man.
Right now, you are in the denial stage. Once again, for the 3rd straight major coaching job he's had. Oh, my God, all these injuries, they just happened. And look, I'm certainly not sitting here telling you Thibs is at fault because Brunson fractured his hand last night, right? But injuries follow him everywhere that he goes because he overworks his players.
That's why we talked about Jimmy the way we talked about Jimmy coming from Minnesota.
So even if he's not at fault for these guys, like generally the script is Thibs comes in with a less than stellar reputation, right? Like wins over the fan base because the brand of basketball he likes to play, something people can get behind. It's blue collar, it's tough, it's defensive minded, and he gets on a spiritual level buy-in from his players, and they love him, and I understand why people want to rally behind him, and they get one good year and they surprise people, and then the wheels fall off. And so I'm just warning you, if it happens next year, don't act like you're shocked. Don't act like this came out of the blue. It has happened everywhere he's gone. It is the cost of doing business. I hope it doesn't happen because I have no ill will to any of those Knicks players. And again, I respect the hell out of, I shouted out Mitchell Robinson on this show. He wasn't a Thibs victim. He just, he had ankle issues throughout the year. He was a tough SOB going back out on that court and trying to play, but the wear and tear is real. And so God bless Josh Hart. I hope all your limbs stay together after playing basically 48 minutes a game for a month straight. I wish you all well next season. I hope I'm wrong, but I've seen this movie before.
I'm going to push back on the valiant effort part of it. They were the 2 seed. They were up.
Well, that is what I agree with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no.
You got to win.
I'm not pushing back on. I'm pushing back on the Knicks. The way it's covered. Yeah. Not on you. Is they were the 2 seed. They were up 3-2, and they were playing the Pacers. Like, no disrespect to the Pacers. If they lost to if they lost to the Celtics, I would say, oh, okay. Like, but the whole thing is they ran out of gas. They were up 3-2 as the 2 seed. They had Game 7 at home, right? They lost. If you want to be taken seriously as like a legit contender, then you need to be treated like a legit contender. And that's where I had a world of respect for Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson's narrative after the game wasn't they ran out of gas. It's like
100%.
Yeah, they didn't do
failure.
Enough.
Yeah, he said it was a failure.
Yeah, and so that's the way I look at the Knicks. When you're the 2 seed and you're up 3-2 in a series, the expectation is you win.
And by the way, you mentioned John Starks.
Oh, come on,
Thank you. Thank you. The guy is practically on the floor, man. Somebody could get hurt by the way he gets up and he's right there on the baseline. He's touching people on their back and all kinds. Sit down, man. I'm so happy that he is.
He was only slightly worse than he was in Game 7 of the '94 Finals.
Oh, yes. Yes. Only slightly.
Maybe only slightly better. Man. I don't know. What was he, 2 for 18 in that game?
My goodness, man. Sit down.
0 for a million last night.
It was ridiculous, man.
Just embarrassing.
Just ridiculous. And by the way, I'm looking at the final stats to try to make sure I had the number correctly. They finished 67%. So when you talk about you're the number 2 seed, you're the number 2 seed, one of the top defenses in the NBA, and you allowed a team to come on your home floor in a Game 7 series-defining game to shoot 67% from the floor, 53 for 79, 13 for 24 from 3, and they beat you 130 to 109.
That's tough.
Gotta love it.
That's tough.
Gotta love it. All right, final one for our super chat is Keith Van Horn. Well, first, Keith Rogers first. We thank you for the donation, Keith Rogers. No comment there. We appreciate it, though. Next time you send in something, we'll read it because you didn't drop a comment in there. But Keith Van Horn, you have a problem?
I think you're forgetting a letter from his name, Devon.
Well,
it appears his actual name is Keith Van Horny.
I don't know what he's horny about, but hey, that's his business. And it's the Keith Van Horn Appreciation Post. Would you imagine him at the 4 spot in today's NBA?
I was actually upset when the Sixers traded Tim Thomas for him, right? That was
I didn't like that either.
I was like, oh, Timmy T. I love Timmy T. Villanova, Patterson, New Jersey.
Yeah.
But no, Keith Van Horn would be a good fit.
And then Tim Thomas went on to have maybe the most frustrating NBA career in history, where it's like
such a weird
every
career.
so often he's just, man, that guy's incredible. Often right before he got the next contract. And then he just kind of, hanging out for, what's weird? I feel like that, excuse me, I feel like that era had way more of those types of guys than now. There are not a ton of guys now that I look at as like, oh, he got paid. And then the one exception.
Jerome James, man, the Knicks.
The one exception that I can think of off the top of my head is Wiggins.
Yeah.
He had that
he's
incredible first year or end of the year with Golden State. Signed on the dotted line and went right back to, the just drifting through games guy. But very few guys are like, they get the big payday and just rest on their laurels.
He has that reputation.
Actually, I did forget one.
Ben Simmons?
Ben Simmons.
That's true.
Mr. FaZe Clan himself.
Now he does have that reputation, Andrew Wiggins. The other part is you just don't know what that off the court stuff was.
Yeah.
It was 2 consecutive seasons with that off the court stuff, whatever that might have been. So I wonder how much that played into it. But yeah, Jerome James back in the day, Seattle Supersonics, has a great playoff run, gets that money from New York. Nothing else except for weight gain from Jerome James for the rest of his career.
Florida A&M, right? Is that where he went? Florida A&M? Okay.
Yeah. So, man, Martian Lynch jumps in. Zach, can Howie fix the Sixers? I need to know.
Does Howie have interest in fixing the Sixers? Is the first one.
Both teams?
How much of an NBA guy is Howie?
He follows team building elsewhere. He's actually close with R.C. Buford.
Okay.
Now the president of
not a bad guy to follow
of the Spurs during Howie's year away.
Mm-hmm.
He went into that. I actually think Howie would probably be more interested in I don't know. I think baseball might be more apt, but I mean, could he fix the Sixers? I think he could put an organizational structure in place and hire good people, but. I don't know if he'd be materially different than Daryl Morey, to be honest with you.
Yeah. All right, that'll do it for us here on this Monday edition.
Thank God, my vocal cords are.
Well, don't get there yet because you have some shout outs.
Listen, I always got to say hello, goodbye to my people on the way out. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Martian Lynch, if you were not in here for my Denver rant earlier, shame on you, my friend. That was like 25% for you and your ears. So I still love you, buddy. But thank you to Winona, to Aaron, to Smy Guy.
What up, Aaron?
Eugene G. Ross.
Gene.
Rick Morse, Phi Chi. The name Devon wouldn't say. Keith Van Horny. Money Mar.
What up, Keith?
Money Mar in the building.
Money Mar.
Jay of the Jungle. You better love somebody.
Oh, you better love somebody. I like that.
Bootzilla.
Boots.
Khalid.
Lil.
Sorry if I said it wrong.
It's okay. Khalid, yeah.
Khalid?
Yeah.
Okay. Khalid. Alex McCoy. Let's see. Who else we got in here? Rick Morse. Lost Sleep TV. I know my guy AC Philla was in here today.
What up, AC? Not AC Slater. We don't like him.
Very fired up. Oh, man. I can't even scroll. I might need Bree to start scrolling for me because my scroll is broken. Brian Knight in here. Bucket Getter 215. Kane in
what
the
up?
house. Broad.
Kane, what up, baby?
P. Hazel. Jim G. Front running fan base. Provolone John.
Oh.
I don't have much left, guys.
That's all right.
My long sir. Elaine Bruno, I see.
What up?
Who was our other super chatter today? Coach Lowell Ricketts.
Coach Lowell Ricketts. What up, Coach?
Everybody, if you enjoyed the show today, and I sure hope you did, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications
Ding.
each
The
and
bell's
every
in the
time
other studio.
that we go
I
live.
couldn't go in there.
I can't promise much after today, but if you enjoyed the show, a thumbs up on the video would be appreciated. Everyone give a special thank you to our guy, Zach Berman,
Give him a what
Eagles
up, Zach.
reporter extraordinaire. Give me a Zach on the way out. And thank you,
Thanks,
as always, to super
Mm.
producer Bree. I believe our good friend Derek Bodner will be back for tomorrow and the rest of the week. We'll see you at 2:30 like we
Marshall
do
Lynch
each and every day.
With a
See you,
Kelly
everybody.
Kapowski in the mentions. We'll see you guys.
Goodbye.
We all silly like the mayor.